trouble in paradise, y'all. Trouble in paradise among the conservative hosts. We have an official feud that is escalating. So Eric Bolling is a former Fox News host. He's now on Newsmax, where roughly 7 people watch him. He is going to call out Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson is, let me try to put this kindly, is a defender of Putin. That's as kind as I could put it. I mean, he goes a lot tougher than I do. So let's listen and we'll break it down.
Before you come at me all over this, I'm very worried about a world war, a nuclear World War III, in fact, where nobody wins. We all lose. So when I see a fellow conservative making statements that could incite a world war, nuclear war, I have to call him out again. And when I see our arch enemy, Russia.
I'm no fan of Tucker Carlson. I don't think he's going to be responsible for World War III. Even if he has objectively shitty opinions on things, I think that might be a stretch, Eric.
Russia and the sociopath Putin using that same conservative as propaganda. You should know about it and maybe get to him.
That is undeniable. You have had a lot of the stuff that Tucker has said. It's been used on Russian TV among hardliners and loyalists to try to build Putin's case. Like, oh, look, even this American agrees with us. We must be right.
And tell him to stand down, because in all things nuclear, caution up front is the best way to avoid total annihilation at the backside of these issues. Turns out Russia's state media are using clips of Fox News' Tucker Carlson to support Vladimir Putin's war efforts in Ukraine. Look at that right there. See that? That's Russian state media using Tucker Carlson, alleged American, as propaganda to make their case.
Alleged American? Come on, dog. I don't like it when people do that, man. Don't make an obviously untrue and silly point to try to bolster your argument, which otherwise might be pretty accurate, right? Undermines the rest of it. Don't do that, Eric. Don't do that.
That Russia is the victim, not the aggressor they obviously are. And again, last Thursday, Tucker Carlson again blamed Ukraine for starting.
I do think that is the narrative from Tucker. It's a pervasive narrative in many circles. This idea that, Russia's a pure victim. Now, look, if you want to have an intellectual and detailed conversation about the events that led up to the invasion of Ukraine, I am more than open to have that conversation. I'm very willing to have that conversation. Personally, I never would have expanded NATO in the first place because I didn't want to give Russia any excuse to do what they did. But ultimately, I do think it's an excuse. Why? Because when you listen to Vladimir Putin's speech right before the invasion, he said in no uncertain terms that, hey, you used to be ours, Ukraine. And he has these Russian imperial ambitions where he feels entitled to portions of Ukraine. At the very least, the eastern region, the Donbass region. And then he had this preposterous thing where he's like, I'm trying to denazify the country. Are you kidding me? There are far-right Nazi problems within Russia. Wouldn't you handle the Nazi problems you have in your own country before you try to handle them in some other country? And then ultimately, you guys know, we watched that phenomenal video from Real Life Lore. You guys should check that out. If you haven't yet, why did Russia invade Ukraine? It's a very, very detailed breakdown. And fundamentally, one of the big parts that almost nobody talks about is that there's a tremendous amount of gas, natural gas, that was just discovered in Ukraine in 2012. They found a phenomenal amount of gas right off the coast of Crimea. And then, oh, would you look at that? In 2014, Putin went in there and said, this is ours now. So, this notion that Putin is a pure victim is fantasy. In the analogy, like what the U.S. did to Iraq is what Russia is doing to Ukraine. That is the most direct way you can look at this. One of the main reasons we went into Iraq was the oil. One of the main reasons Putin went into Ukraine is the natural gas. I got news for you guys. Big, powerful countries do fucked up shit. There's not just something inherently evil about Americans. Like our genes are fucked up and we just have an evil gene. And so, we are always the aggressor in every situation. No, the American empire is grotesque and does terrible things. Other big, powerful states do terrible things. This is another example of that. So I don't buy the narrative of like, pure victim. Nonsense. Utter nonsense. delusional, honestly.
Starting the war, although Russia invaded her. And he continues to claim Russia should cut off all funds, or America should cut off all funds and military support to Ukraine. Watch this.
So the day that war began, which was February 24th, two things were very obvious. The first was that there was no way the Ukrainian army would be able to win a decisive military victory over Russia. And the reason was simple. Russia is too big. Ukraine is too small. The Russian military is many times the size of the Ukrainian military. Plus, of course, it has nuclear weapons. Russia itself is the largest country on planet Earth. It's got a relatively huge economy for the region, and it's got 145 million people who live there. Ukraine has a population of about 40 million. It's the poorest country in Europe.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that matters. Perhaps the most serious allegation, Tucker said, is that Ukraine wants to hit Russia first with nuclear weapons. Watch this part.
In it, he casually called for the United States to nuke Vladimir Putin. Quote, the other nuclear states need to say very firmly that as soon as Russia even thinks of carrying out nuclear strikes on foreign territory, in this case the territory of Ukraine, there will be swift retaliatory nuclear strikes to destroy the nuclear launch sites in Russia. Parse that, and we're quoting, as soon as Russia even thinks of carrying out nuclear strikes, meaning before Russia actually launches missiles, the U.S. needs to launch nuclear weapons against Russia.
Well, that sounded odd, even for a pro-Russia commentator like Tucker. So we did a little homework. Apparently, Tucker may have done so as well. It could have. We looked up the Guardian article, and here's what the headline said. Kyiv urges the West to spell out how it would respond to Russian nuclear strike. Key word here is respond to a Russian nuclear strike. And the quote Tucker uses is accurate, except the aide clearly says that if Russia strikes Ukraine, they hope there will be retaliatory strikes against Russia. So that's interesting. Tucker, he's a smart guy.
Look, let's keep it real on the nuclear front. Everybody needs to shut the fuck up about nuclear. They do. I mean, Putin has now repeatedly threatened nuclear strikes. He needs to www.shuddy.net. That shit is dangerous as fuck. Now, he could just be bluffing, but I don't want to fucking find out. And even if he is bluffing, it takes a certain degree of sociopathy to do that, right? And then if the argument is, hey, if they use nukes on us, let's use it on them, I understand where that would come from. But that's also, like, at that point, we're just talking about the end of organized civilization on planet Earth, right? If there's a nuclear war between Russia and the United States, it's game, set, match on everything and everybody. So to casually muse about this stuff out loud, I mean, it is super duper dangerous. Now, of course, the onus first and foremost falls on Vladimir Putin for doing the illegal invasion in the first place, right? Like, that's where the blame goes. But I do think it's a fair point to say it's not like the U.S. is first and foremost concerned with a negotiated settlement and peace deal. You know, they want to weaken Russia by proxy with Ukraine. That's what they want to do. And the other thing is, any sort of negotiated settlement is going to have some terms in it that the West is not going to like. You know, probably would involve Crimea going to Russia, portions of eastern Ukraine and the Donbas region going to Russia. I totally understand from the perspective of a Ukrainian. Fuck that, I'm not giving up any land. And Zelensky keeps saying, I'm not giving up an inch. And it's like, okay, I get it. If I was in your shoes, I would probably say the same thing. But then you're going to have a long, extended war that leads to tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people dying, and we're going to continue to be on the brink of nuclear war. So, look, Russia is not a partner for peace in this. They illegally invaded a country. The U.S. is not a partner for peace in this. When there were instances of potentially being able to find a way out of this, the U.S. responded by sending more weapons to Ukraine and saying, like, no, apparently there was a report that Boris Johnson, like, slapped down some sort of potential peace agreement. I didn't read the specifics on that, so I'm not sure how accurate that is, but look, this shit is crazy, man. Okay, the whole thing about, like, let's talk about what side you're on, that's only hurting the situation at the moment. We need to find a way, for the sake of humanity, to end this conflict. It would be ideal if Putin just withdraws, but I don't think he's going to do that because he's going to look like the absolute idiot he is. It'll be tail between his legs, walks away defeated. So I don't think he's going to do that. So anything, give him a little bit of something to save face, and have a negotiated settlement that can be agreed upon, broadly speaking. Not everybody's going to be happy with a negotiated settlement. That's like part and parcel of a negotiated settlement, but let's find some way out of this, right? So, but Eric Bolling's very pro-Ukraine. I mean, look, he was even questioning, like, Tucker doesn't even want to send more military aid to Ukraine. It's like, bro, we've sent like $30 billion already. Don't act like it's an unreasonable position to say, maybe don't send more aid because we already sent them tens of billions of dollars. And by the way, Jackson, Mississippi doesn't even have clean water and nobody's doing Dickie McGee's acts about that. Like, we could point to 1,000 problems here at home. Now, to be fair, these conservatives don't want to fix any of those problems, right? Tucker doesn't actually want to fix any of those problems here. So, he doesn't have the same concern that a lefty would have when they say, I don't know if we should keep arming Ukraine and funding Ukraine. But don't act like it's an unreasonable position, especially because every other week, seemingly, we see a new headline of, like, sending another $10 billion to Ukraine. And it's like, clearly when the government wants to do something, they immediately do it. When they want to do it, they just nonstop. Just go ahead, loot the treasury. All systems go. But, if they don't want to do it, then they're, the money, bro. God, the money. What are we going to do? We don't have the money. We lost it, bro. So, anyway, interesting fight. Let's see what else he says.
Did he just miss that little yet very contextual changing word, respond? Or was that Freudian on his part?
Freudian? Freudian? Freudian's about, like, how, like, you want to fuck your parents. That's what people usually mean when they say Freud, or Freudian slip. I mean, that is the main thing people always talk about when they talk about Freud, is like his weird theories about how you want to have sexual relations with your parents. So, anyway, random pivot. Read some Freud. It's actually very interesting. Not the fucking your parents part, but a lot of the other stuff. He had some phenomenal insights. Anyway. Again, not fucking your parents. That's not the phenomenal insight part, to be clear. There are other parts that are very insightful. Id, super ego, stuff like that. Interesting guy, and apparently he was high on cocaine like 24/7, which actually kind of made him more interesting, not gonna lie. But here you go, Tucker Carlson versus Eric Bolling. Just like that gif that people used to share a lot on Twitter. I say, let him fight. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.